Welcome to Tabletop Gaming Guild. Tabletop Gaming Guild is all about the experiences members of playing tabletop games with friends and families can curate. Today we're looking at Cryptid Urban Legends, designed by Hal Duncan, Ruth Revere, published by Osprey Games, and art by Kwanchai Moria. We have previously looked at Cryptid. Now, Cryptid Urban Legends is a standalone independent game with the same theme and from the same universe. While Cryptid was about solving the puzzle faster than your opponents, this is about going directly head to head and being better at solving an ever-changing puzzle than your opponent. To set up Cryptid, first you'll separate the blocks, normal blocks from mysterious blocks, setting 3 blocks out in a triangle formation. Then 4 regular blocks will be set aside and the remaining blocks will be shuffled in with the mysterious blocks. Those 4 regular blocks will go on top of the shuffled deck, so that at the beginning of the game, all the blocks will be regular blocks. Then each player will get their own personal deck of cards, one for the cryptids and one for the scientists, and each player will get a wild card and a player aid. Cryptid will get their 4 presence counter. The first one will be going onto the block at the top of the triangle. Then adjacent to that block, you will have 2 red, 2 black, and a white on one side, then 2 red, 2 white, and a black on the other side. These red clue tokens will be set aside for now. They will show up a few turns into the game. The row that has the fewest number of blocks on it at the beginning of a round is the active row, and all the sensors begin on that side. All the sensors will also start the round in the active row and be moving into the inactive row throughout the round. The player that's closest to the active row is the starting player for the round, and for the first round of the game, the active row is always the side closest to the cryptid. The goal of this game depends on which side you're playing as. If you're playing as the cryptid, you cannot win in the first 2 turns. To win, first there has to be 7 blocks on the board, which I'll go into how you increase the number of blocks as I teach you the rules. Additionally, they will have to have their presence counters on the furthest blocks on each side of the board during the phase 3 of the game, the victory check. The scientists can win on the first turn of the game. They win if during the victory check, Cryptid has 1 or fewer presence counters on the board. The game can also end if this deck of blocks runs out, in which case all remaining evidence tokens on the board will be given out based on whose side of the board they're closest to, and whoever has the most evidence tokens wins the game. The game is broken up into 5 phases: the censor phase, hiding phase, victory phase, restrict phase, and expand phase. Before starting the first censor phase, you will draw 3 cards into your hand, and you'll never get any more cards unless you spend an action to do so. Players will be taking turns moving all these sensors from the active row into the inactive row. Once they are in the inactive row, they cannot be moved anymore this round. On a player's turn, they can either play a card from their hand, use their wild card, or draw cards. If they're playing a card from their hand, we're going to look at the action type listed on it and move the sensors as designated. There are 3 types: movements. If I use the align token, all tokens of one color move from the active row to the inactive row in the same diagonal direction. So for example, if I want to move red to the diagonally to left, if I move these 2 diagonally left, these also have to go diagonally to left, so they could not have some going one direction, others going another. If I choose to split, I take all sensors in one zone and move them diagonally any directions I want. However, that'll always give me 2 directions I can go in, and each direction must get at least 1 sensor. If I choose to shuffle, I take 1 single sensor and move it to side and diagonal. However, it has to go the same direction the entire movement. So I cannot go to side once and then diagonally backwards. If there is no spaces to go sideways, you cannot go that direction at all. So I cannot choose to simply go diagonally down to the right for me. And the wild card gives you all those same movement types, but as a one-time use. Once you've used it, you flip it, and you do not get it back unless you manage to take one of these evidence tokens, which we'll get into how to get those later. If you choose to take your action to draw cards, note this is the only way to get cards into your hand after the beginning of the game. And you also note you do have a hand cap of 4, so you cannot take this action if you already have 4 cards. If you take this action when you have 3 cards, you're only drawing 1. Once all sensors have moved into the inactive row, that ends the sensor phase, and you're moving into the hide phase, in which the cryptid can add presence to the inactive row. They do this by either stating a color combination or a number combination. So, for example, if they called out white and black as the color combination, they could put a presence on this block, because that block is adjacent to both white and black. However, this block is adjacent to white, black, and red. Because red was not in the color combination that they chose, they cannot put a presence counter there. However, if they chose to say 6 as their statement, each of these blocks is adjacent to 6 sensor cubes, so they get a presence on both these blocks. One key thing to note on later rounds of the game when there's more blocks on the board is presence can only be placed diagonally to existing presence. So even if a block applies to the rule stated, so if I say 4 in this example, only the block on the far right would get a token. If ever you have to put a presence out that's more than the number of presence tokens you have, you can take some from the active row because they're going to go away at the end of this phase anyways. At the end of the hide phase, all presence counters from the active row disappear, and then you go into the victory check phase. Check to see if the cryptid has 1 or fewer presence counters on the board, or presence on both the furthest ends of the blocks with 7 blocks on the board. If neither of those conditions are met, continue on to phase 4. The restrict phase only happens if there's 7 blocks on the board. During this phase, the scientist removes 2 blocks from the outer edges of the board. However, those 2 blocks do have to be adjacent to each other, and neither can have a presence on them. So he can remove these 2 blocks, and these go out of the game. If that ever isolates sensor tokens, you just slide them over to the nearest block. 5th phase is expand. The active player gets to draw 2 cards from the top of the deck and put them on either end of the active rows, making it the inactive row for the next round because it's going to be the longer row. If he reveals a mysterious block, he must put an evidence counter on that block. Those evidence counters can be claimed throughout a round by the cryptid if they put a presence token on it. That would mean they get to claim that evidence token and reactivate their wild card. If, however, the cryptid did not manage to put a presence token on that block, the scientist can remove that block during the restrict phase. And then they get to take the evidence tokens and reactivate their wild card. I think a little bit of the strategy is important to understand before you start. So key thing in this game for the scientists is they want to make the sensors as unbalanced as possible, and the cryptid is trying to prevent that. So they're trying to make it harder for them to the cryptid to put presence tokens down. Because you don't get your wild card back, it's very important to save that for when it's really critical or when you're about to be able to claim a clue to get that back anyways. Both players also have to remember to think in 2 directions, because you're not just paying attention to the color of the cubes, you're also paying attention to the numbers. So if you can get one of the players to focus too much on one aspect, that is a potential way of winning the game because, they've accidentally left some really juicy options open for you. It's also important to realize that the only way to get new cards is by spending an action during the sensor phase. So it's very important to recognize when movement is not going to actually have too much of an effect, or manipulate it so that no matter where the movement the next player takes, it's not going to be bad for you, so you have that free turn to be able to draw cards. and you want to draw cards and keep your card counts up to give you flexible options, but you do not want to be giving away too many free turns for the opponent. Once you get those key strategies down, this game should go pretty smoothly and fast. Thank you again for watching. Please join us again on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, and other social medias. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.